The warning klaxons blared through the Stellar Wind's cockpit as Captain Riya Patel watched her NAV computer light up like a Christmas tree. The massive solar storm hadn't been in any of the consortium's predicted flight paths, and now it was bearing down on her cargo ship with the fury of 1,000 suns. But that wasn't what had her cursing under her breath, it was the distress signal coming from the passenger vessel dead ahead. "Computer, analysis of the passenger ship?" Riya demanded, her fingers already dancing across the controls. "Passenger vessel designation Aurora Dawn. Primary systems failing. Shields at 12%. Estimated survival time in current solar storm, 4.2 minutes, the AI responded with infuriating calm. Riya's jaw clenched. The consortium's regulations were crystal clear. All rescue operations in Level 5 hazard conditions required prior authorization from Central Command. The paperwork alone would take hours. The Aurora Dawn had minutes. "To hell with regulations," Riya muttered, pushing her engines to full power. The stellar winds surged forward, its reinforced hull groaning under the strain of the solar winds. Her computer immediately began flashing warning messages about unauthorized rescue protocols and violation of Consortium Directive 247-B. The Aurora Dawn grew larger in her view screen, its sleek hull already showing signs of strain from the solar storm. Riya's hands flew across her controls, calculating a trajectory that would let her extend her ship's shields around the passenger vessel. It was a maneuver that violated at least 15 different consortium safety protocols, and was probably the Aurora Dawn's only chance of survival. "Passenger vessel Aurora Dawn, this is Captain Riya Patel of the Stellar Winds. Preparing for emergency shield extension. Brace for turbulence." The response came through staticky but clear. "Captain Patel, this is First Officer Kral of the Aurora Dawn. We have 300 passengers aboard, including a Consortium High Council delegation. Our systems are failing. We need immediate assistance." Riya's blood ran cold. A High Council delegation? This just got even more complicated. But there was no turning back now. "Hang tight, Aurora Dawn. This is going to get interesting." Riya executed her maneuver, bringing the stellar winds alongside the passenger ship in a move that her old flight instructor would have called criminally reckless. The solar storm raged around them, battering both ships with waves of deadly radiation. Warning messages screamed across her console as she pushed her shields beyond their rated capacity, extending them to encompass both vessels. "Shield extension complete," her computer announced. "Warning. Current configuration exceeds safety parameters by 247%. Shields failing in approximately 8 minutes. That's all we need," Riya responded, already plotting their escape vector. "Aurora Dawn, initiate emergency docking procedures. We're getting you out of here." The next 7 minutes were a symphony of alarms, creaking metal, and increasingly urgent computer warnings as Riya guided both ships through the storm. She ignored the incoming priority messages from Consortium Command, probably orders to stand down and let proper protocols be followed. Instead, she focused on the delicate dance of keeping both ships intact while navigating through the solar hell around them. Finally, mercifully, they broke free of the storm's edge. Riya's shields collapsed almost immediately, but they'd made it. The Aurora Dawn was safe, its passengers alive, and Riya was about to be in more trouble than she'd ever been in her life. "Captain Patel," a new voice came through her calm, cold and precise. "This is High Counselor Vexthor of the Consortium. Your actions today represent a gross violation of our most sacred safety protocols." "With all due respect, High Counselor," Riya replied, watching as her computer tallied up the list of regulations she'd broken. "Those protocols would have killed everyone aboard your ship." "That is not your determination to make," Vexthor's voice grew even colder. "Humanity's continued disregard for proper procedure cannot be tolerated. You will be escorted to Central Command to face charges. The Consortium will be reviewing Earth's entire space flight certification program. As Rhea watched the consortium patrol ships approaching her position, she couldn't help but smile grimly. She'd known the consequences when she'd made her choice. 300 lives saved versus one pilot's career? That wasn't even a question. Understood, High Counselor, she responded. I'll save you some time with the review. We humans have a saying, sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right. The silence that followed was deafening. Rhea began powering down her systems for the consortium inspection, knowing that this was just the beginning. The battle between human intuition and alien bureaucracy was about to reach a whole new level, and somehow, she'd made herself the poster child for everything the consortium feared about human pilots. Well, if they wanted to make an example of her, she'd give them one hell of an example to think about. The consortium Central Command's detention center gleamed with the sterile perfection that seemed to define alien bureaucracy. Rhea sat in the interrogation chamber, watching her reflection in the polished metallic walls as she waited for her hearing to begin. 3 days had passed since the Aurora Dawn incident, and she'd spent most of them filling out forms explaining why she had filled out other forms incorrectly. The door whispered open, revealing a towering figure that seemed to be made entirely of crystalline angles and disapproval. Administrator Zwe, the consortium's chief of pilot certification, entered with a grace that seemed impossible for something that looked like an angry chandelier. Captain Rhea Patel, Zwextal's voice resonated through the chamber, each syllable precise and cutting. Your actions have forced the consortium to create 17 new emergency protocols. 17. We hadn't needed a new protocol in 300 cycles. Always happy to inspire innovation, Rhea replied, earning a shimmer of what she assumed was crystalline frustration from the administrator. This is exactly the attitude that concerns us. Zwextal moved to the center of the room, projecting a holographic display of Rhea's rescue maneuver. Observe, in the span of 7 minutes, you violated 43 safety protocols, ignored 12 direct orders, and exceeded recommended shield parameters by a factor that our systems initially refused to calculate. And saved 300 lives, Rhea added quietly. By endangering them further. Zwextal's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. There are procedures, Captain. Procedures developed over millennia to ensure the safety of all spacefaring species. Humans seem pathologically incapable of following them. A new figure entered the chamber, a small, tentacled being Rhea recognized as Undersecretary Nix, one of the more moderate voices in the consortium bureaucracy. The High Council has reached a decision regarding your case, Captain Patel. Rhea straightened in her chair. This was it, probably the end of her flying career, maybe even Earth's entire independent pilot program. You will be required to undergo complete recertification under Administrator Zwextal's direct supervision, Nix announced. Successfully complete the program, and you may retain your pilot's license. Fail, and every human pilot in consortium space will be required to work under direct alien supervision. That's not fair, Rhea protested. You can't punish every human pilot for my actions. Your actions merely highlighted an existing concern, Zwextal interjected. Human pilots consistently demonstrate a dangerous combination of creativity and recklessness. The consortium cannot risk another Aurora Dawn incident. The rescue worked, Rhea insisted. The rescue should never have been attempted without proper authorization, Zwextal countered. You will report to Training Bay 7 at dawn. There, you will learn the proper way to operate in civilized space. As Rhea was escorted to her temporary quarters, she found herself accompanied by Undersecretary Nix, whose tentacles were writhing in what seemed like anxiety. Off the record, Captain, Nix whispered, many of us were impressed by your rescue. Terrified, but impressed. However, Administrator Zwextal has been pushing for stricter control over human pilots for years. Your incident gave them the leverage they needed. So this recertification is rigged from the start? Not officially, Nix's tentacles twisted thoughtfully. But Zwextal has designed the program specifically to clash with human instincts. They believe humans must be taught to suppress their improvisational tendencies. Ria spent the night reviewing the consortium's pilot regulations, thousands of pages of precise protocols for every conceivable situation. By morning, her eyes were burning and her head was pounding, but she'd learned enough to know she was in trouble. These weren't just rules, they were a philosophy completely alien to human thinking. Training Bay 7 turned out to be a massive simulation chamber that could recreate any space flight scenario with perfect accuracy. Administrator Zwaxtal was waiting inside, their crystalline form refracting the morning light into dazzling patterns. Your first test, Zwaxtal announced without preamble, will evaluate your ability to follow basic protocol in a standard docking procedure. You have 60 seconds to complete the pre-flight checklist. Ria looked at the checklist that appeared before her. It contained over 300 items. This is impossible, she protested. No one could verify all these in 60 seconds. A properly organized mind can, Zwaxtal replied. Your difficulty with this basic task proves our concerns about human pilots. Begin. As Ria struggled through the deliberately impossible task, she realized this wasn't just about following rules. It was about breaking the human spirit, about forcing her species to abandon their very nature in the name of standardization. The question was, could she find a way to prove that human instincts weren't a liability without triggering an interstellar diplomatic crisis? As she watched Zwaxtal log her first of what would undoubtedly be many failures, Ria knew she needed to find an answer fast. The future of human space flight depended on it. Unknown to both of them, events were already in motion that would test both human instinct and consortium protocol to their breaking points. Sometimes the universe has a way of forcing the issue, and it rarely files the proper paperwork first. 2 weeks into her recertification program, Ria had failed 37 different protocol tests, memorized 8,000 pages of regulations, and seriously considered stealing a ship and fleeing to uncharted space. Administrator Zwaxtal had turned out to be an even more demanding instructor than she'd feared, marking her down for infractions as minor as completing safety checks too quickly. Your efficiency is not appreciated, Zwaxtal had declared during yesterday's orbital alignment exercise. Proper procedure requires exactly 7 minutes to verify navigational coordinates. You completed it in 6 minutes and 48 seconds. Today's simulation was a simple cargo transfer, or would have been simple if the procedure didn't involve 46 distinct authorization steps. Ria sat in the simulator's pilot chair, forcing herself to move with deliberate slowness as she worked through the checklist. Initiating docking procedure, she announced, fighting to keep the frustration from her voice. Requesting permission to begin pre-alignment verification sequence. Permission granted, Zwaxtal's crystalline form sparkled with what might have been satisfaction. You are learning, Captain Patel. Perhaps humans can be taught proper. The chamber's emergency alert system suddenly screamed to life, cutting off Zwaxtal mid-sentence. Red warning lights bathed the room as Undersecretary Nix burst through the door, tentacles flailing in panic. Administrator. We have a Category 1 emergency at Starbase Sigma. Nix's translator barely kept up with their rapid speech. The station's quantum core is destabilizing. Catastrophic failure predicted within 40 minutes. Ria's blood ran cold. Starbase Sigma was one of the consortium's largest space stations, home to over 10,000 beings from dozens of species. A quantum core breach would vaporize everything within 1,000 kilometers. Implementing Emergency Protocol 7249A, Zwaxtal announced, their crystalline body vibrating with controlled energy. All non-essential personnel will evacuate while authorized crisis response teams complete proper emergency procedures. How long does Protocol 7249A take to implement? Ria demanded, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. Standard response time is 3 hours, Nix replied, tentacles twisting anxiously. The station has 40 minutes. Which is why we must begin immediately, Zhuangxtal stated. Every second spent discussing protocol is a second wasted. No, Ria stood up, her mind racing. Every second spent following protocol is a second wasted. I can stabilize that core in 20 minutes. Absolutely not, Zhuangxtal's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. You are an uncertified pilot under review. Protocol strictly forbids. Protocol is going to kill 10,000 people. Ria snapped. She turned to Nyx. The station's quantum core, it's a Mark 7 harmonizer, isn't it? Like the one in the Aurora Dawn? Nyx's tentacles writhed in confirmation. Yes, but... Then I know how to fix it. When I extended my shields around the Aurora Dawn, I had to harmonize our quantum frequencies. The same principle should work on a larger scale. Ria was already moving toward the door. I need a ship with reinforced shields and a quantum synchronizer. Captain Patel, if you attempt this, you will automatically fail your certification, Zhuangxtal warned. All human pilots will lose their autonomy. Ria paused at the door, looking back at the crystalline administrator. Then I fail. But those people live. She turned to Nyx. I need that ship. Now. To her surprise, it was Nyx who moved first, tentacles flying over a nearby console. Docking Bay 12. The research vessel Quantum Dawn. It has everything you need. They met Ria's startled gaze. Some of us remember the Aurora Dawn, Captain. Ria ran. Behind her, she could hear Zhuangxtal issuing rapid-fire commands, probably calling security to stop her. But she had a head start, and more importantly, she had motivation. The lives of 10,000 beings weren't just numbers in a protocol manual to her. The Quantum Dawn was a sleek vessel, clearly designed for scientific research rather than emergency response. Perfect. As Ria sprinted up the boarding ramp, she could hear security alerts blaring throughout the facility. Her access codes shouldn't work, but the airlock opened smoothly. Inside the ship's computer greeted her. Welcome aboard. Undersecretary Nyx has granted you emergency authorization. However, I must inform you that this action violates 73 different protocols. Only 73? Ria's hands flew over the controls, starting the engine sequence. I must be losing my touch. Plot a course to Starbase Sigma, fastest possible route. The fastest route violates an additional 12 safety protocols, the computer noted. Plot it anyway. As the Quantum Dawn lifted off, Ria caught a glimpse of Administrator Zhuangxtal entering the docking bay, their crystalline form flashing with what had to be rage. The Administrator's voice crackled over the comm. Captain Patel, this is your final warning. Return to dock immediately or face permanent revocation of all flight privileges. Ria took a deep breath, thinking of all the lives at stake. Then she hit the throttle. Sorry, Administrator. Some privileges aren't worth the cost of keeping them. The Quantum Dawn shot out of the docking bay like a bullet, leaving protocol, bureaucracy, and possibly Ria's entire career behind. She had 20 minutes to save Starbase Sigma, and not a single one of those minutes would be spent following proper procedures. As she pushed the ship to its limits, Ria couldn't help but smile grimly. Well, Administrator, she muttered to herself, you wanted to see how humans handle a crisis. I guess you're about to find out. Starbase Sigma loomed in the Quantum Dawn's viewscreen, its massive form already showing signs of the crisis within. Energy fluctuations rippled across its shields, creating eerie patterns of light that reminded Ria of Aurora Borealis, beautiful, but in this case deadly. Core destabilization at 78%, the ship's computer announced. Station shields failing. Estimated time to catastrophic breach, 18 minutes. Ria's hands danced across the controls, bringing up detailed scans of the station's quantum core. The situation was even worse than she'd feared. The containment field was collapsing, and the standard emergency protocols were worse than useless. They were actively accelerating the destabilization. Captain Patel, a new voice crackled over her comm, "This is Station Commander Vril. Our engineering team is implementing Emergency Protocol 7249A, but the core's deterioration is exceeding predicted parameters." "Forget the protocol," Rhea replied, already maneuvering the quantum dawn into position. "Your containment field is creating a recursive feedback loop. Every by-the-book solution is just feeding the problem. The protocol must be followed," another voice cut in, Administrator Zwextal, apparently monitoring from Central Command. "Commander Vril, Captain Patel is not authorized to." "With all due respect," Rhea interrupted, "we don't have time for this. Commander, I need you to drop your shields." "Drop our..." Commander Vril's voice wavered. "That's absolutely forbidden during a core crisis. Protocol specifically states. Your shields are trapping the quantum fluctuations inside the station. Drop them, and I can extend my ship's quantum synchronized shield to stabilize the core." Rhea checked her readings again. "We have 15 minutes before this whole station becomes a very expensive light show." There was a moment of tense silence, broken only by the steady warning beeps of various system alerts. Then Commander Vril spoke again, their voice firmer now. "The protocol has never failed before, Captain. First time for everything, Commander. But right now, I'm offering you a choice between probably dying by the book, or possibly living by breaking the rules." Another pause. Rhea could almost hear the internal struggle, years of ingrained protocol worship versus the very real prospect of imminent death. Quantum fluctuations now exceeding containment parameters, the computer helpfully added. 14 minutes to critical failure. "Lower the shields," Commander Vril ordered suddenly. "May the consortium forgive us. They can court-martial us all if we survive," Rhea replied, already powering up the Quantum Dawn's experimental shield system. "Initiating quantum synchronization, now." The ship's shields extended outward, enveloping the massive space station in a shimmering field of energy. Rhea's fingers flew over the controls, making micro-adjustments to match the chaotic quantum frequencies emanating from the station's core. "This is impossible," Zwextal's voice crackled through the comm, "the energy requirements alone." "Humans specialize in impossible," Rhea grunted, fighting to maintain control as the ship's systems groaned under the strain. "Now please be quiet. This part requires concentration." The next 10 minutes were a desperate dance of energy fields and quantum harmonics. Rhea pushed both ship and shields well beyond their design limits, using the quantum synchronizer in ways its creators had probably never imagined. Warning alerts screamed from every console as she worked to contain and stabilize the runaway reactions within the station's core. "Core destabilization at 93%, the computer announced. "Shield integrity failing. Captain, the quantum harmonics are." "I can see that," Rhea snapped, making another series of rapid adjustments. "Rerouting power from non-essential systems. Diverting emergency reserves to shield matrix." The ship shuddered violently. On her screens, Rhea could see the quantum patterns slowly, painfully beginning to align. The core's chaotic energy was being forced into new configurations, guided by the synchronized shields into stable patterns. Core destabilization at 87%, 82%. The computer's voice was barely audible over the strain of overtaxed systems. 75%. "Come on," Rhea whispered, her hands never stopping their dance across the controls. "Come on, work with me here." The numbers continued to fall. 60%. 50. 45. With each percentage point, the violent shuddering of ship and station decreased slightly. The quantum patterns grew more organized, more controlled. Finally, after what felt like hours but had actually been just under 12 minutes, the computer announced, "Core stabilization achieved." quantum harmonics returning to normal parameters. The silence that followed was deafening. Rhea sat back in her chair, suddenly aware that she'd been holding her breath. Her hands were shaking as she powered down the emergency systems. "Station status?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "All systems stabilizing," Commander Vril replied, sounding slightly stunned. "The core, it's actually running more efficiently than before." "How did you?" Captain Patel, Administrator Zwixtal's voice cut in, carrying an odd tone that Rhea couldn't quite identify. "You have violated 47 emergency protocols, ignored direct orders from superior officers, and completely disregarded basic safety procedures." "Yes," Rhea agreed tiredly. "I did." "You also," Zwixtal continued, "saved 10,243 lives using methods that our most advanced quantum physicists are still trying to understand." "Well," Rhea managed a small smile, "humans have a saying, sometimes you have to think outside the box." "Indeed." There was a long pause. Perhaps there are some gaps in our protocols that need to be addressed." A week after the Starbase Sigma incident, Rhea found herself once again standing before the Consortium High Council. This time, however, the chamber felt different. The usual oppressive atmosphere of bureaucratic judgment had been replaced by something almost like curiosity. "Captain Patel," High Counselor Vexthor began, their form shifting in the subtle way that indicated deep thought, "you have presented us with a unique dilemma. Your actions at Starbase Sigma were a flagrant violation of our most sacred protocols." However, Undersecretary Nix added, tentacles moving in elegant patterns, "those same actions saved thousands of lives and demonstrated problem-solving capabilities that we had not previously considered viable." Administrator Zwixtal floated forward, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. "Our analysis of your quantum synchronization technique has revealed aspects of shield harmonics that our scientists had never theorized." It was. They seemed to struggle with the next word, innovative. Rhea managed to keep her face neutral, but inside she was stunned. From Zwixtal, innovative was practically a declaration of love. "The consortium prides itself on efficiency and order," Vexthor continued. "Our protocols have served us well for millennia. But recent events have forced us to consider that perhaps efficiency can take different forms." "What we mean to say," Nix interjected, their tentacles curling in what Rhea had learned was amusement, "is that chaos and creativity may have their place in the cosmic order. We have reviewed the entire history of human space flight," Zwixtal announced. "While your species' methods are unorthodox, your success rates are undeniable. The Aurora Dawn incident, the Starbase Sigma crisis, these are not isolated events. Humans consistently achieve positive outcomes through what we would consider impossible means. Therefore," Vexthor rose to their full height, "the consortium has reached a decision. We will be establishing a new division, the Emergency Response and Innovation Corps. This organization will operate under modified protocols." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "Modified how?" "The Corps will be permitted to deviate from standard procedures when circumstances require creative solutions," Zwixtal explained, managing to make it sound like they weren't describing their worst nightmare. "It will be a joint operation between human pilots and consortium specialists, combining our different approaches. Captain Patel," Vexthor's tone became formal, "we would like you to head this new division. Your unique perspective and demonstrated ability to achieve results, while unconventional, make you the ideal candidate." Rhea blinked in surprise. "You want me to train other pilots to break the rules?" "We want you to teach them when and how to break them effectively," Nix corrected. "And more importantly, to teach our own people when flexibility is preferable to rigid adherence to protocol. There will, of course, be guidelines," Zwixtal added quickly. "We're not suggesting complete anarchy. But perhaps there is a middle ground between chaos and control." Rhea looked around the chamber, at these beings who had been so ready to ground every human pilot in space a week ago. Something had changed. The Starbase Sigma incident had shown them something they couldn't ignore, that sometimes the best solution wasn't found in any manual. "I accept," she said finally. "On one condition." The council members shifted slightly. "Yes?" Vexthor prompted. "The first protocol of the Innovation Corps should be that there are times when protocol must yield to principle. Sometimes saving lives means breaking rules." There was a long pause as the council members communicated in their silent way. Finally, Vexthor spoke, "Agreed. Though perhaps we could word it somewhat more diplomatically in the official documentation." "I'll leave the paperwork to you," Rhea smiled. "That's what you do best, after all." As she left the council chamber, Rhea found Undersecretary Nix waiting for her in the corridor. Their tentacles were moving in what she now recognized as excitement. "Was this your idea?" she asked. "Let's just say I helped them see the potential," Nix replied. "The consortium has existed for thousands of years by adapting and incorporating new species and ideas. We had perhaps forgotten that part of our heritage until you reminded us. By breaking every rule in the book? By showing us that the book sometimes needs new chapters." Nix's tentacles curled thoughtfully. "The universe is vast, Captain Patel. Perhaps it's time we admitted that there's more than one way to navigate it." As Rhea walked through the station's corridors toward her ship, she passed a group of young alien pilots in training. They stopped and stared at her with what might have been awe, or possibly horror, it was hard to tell with some species. But among them was a young crystalline being who actually gave her what appeared to be a respectful nod. Maybe there was hope for bureaucrats after all. The Quantum Dawn was waiting in its dock, its systems fully repaired after the strain of saving Starbase Sigma. As Rhea approached, she saw that someone, probably Nix, had added a new designation to its hull, Eric 001, Emergency Response and Innovation Corps. Well, she muttered to herself as she climbed aboard, this should be interesting. The ship's computer greeted her, "Welcome aboard, Captain. Shall I begin pre-flight checks according to standard protocol?" Rhea smiled. "No, I think we'll try something new. After all, that's what we're here for." As the Quantum Dawn lifted off, carrying her toward whatever challenges awaited the first human-alien cooperative venture of its kind, Rhea couldn't help but think that sometimes the best protocols were the ones that hadn't been written yet. The universe was full of surprises, and finally, the consortium was learning to be surprised.